Steve Reich's drumming was written in 1971. It's one of our favorite pieces that we play all the time and we talk about all the time. It comes from a bunch of different things. In Steve Reich's own life and his own work, there's kind of a bunch of different elements that come together to make the piece happen. The players start with just one note at the very beginning and start adding up the rhythm one note at a time. He called it substituting beats for rests, which is maybe a funny philosophical way of saying just adding in one note at a time. Probably the most interesting one and the most novel one is the point in the piece where the players who have built up rhythm and are playing in unison seem like they're starting to mess up and like the music is starting to come apart. Actually what's happening there, it's written into the score, it's intentional, is an effect that he called phasing, where each person is playing exactly the same rhythm and one of them slowly starts to speed up, which sounds like a paradox, but that's what it is. And where it comes from is his experiments in an electronic studio where he had two reel-to-reel tape players happening at the same time, but they were on two different kinds of analog tape players, and you press them at the same time, and very slowly over time they start to come apart. And he realized eventually what happened is you create a kind of canon, just like Row, Row, Row Your Boat. You start singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat, somebody else sings it a few notes later, a whole new, very cool thing comes out of that. Except this happened in very microcosmic little bits and pieces, and it happened over a gradually changing process, and not with two people just starting in different places. At first he thought this was just a cool thing for machines to do and that it wouldn't be interesting for people to do. And then he tried it with people and realized that it was incredibly fun and exciting and difficult for people to do, but really rewarding. I think the most interesting aspect of the phasing, once it happens, is that once you arrive at a new point where the two players have put their rhythms off into different places and have created a canon, the resulting pattern of those two laid on top of each other is a whole new type of melody and a whole new bunch of rhythms that are happening inside of it. And the whole rest of that piece is an exploration of those effects and all the different ways that you can make that happen on those drums. The other thing that was so influential in him writing this piece was a trip he made to Africa in 1971, to West Africa and Ghana. And he saw how the tribes there made music. And although he didn't take anything, I think, really exactly from what he got there and put it into drumming, he was very inspired by the idea of people coming together and drumming as a group. There wasn't necessarily one person like a conductor in an orchestra showing everybody what to do all the time. There were a bunch of people coming together and all very much interacting with each other to make the music happen. So this is a really, really exciting and fun piece for us to do as a percussion ensemble because it puts the percussion front and center. And in fact, when you put the entire piece together, there are singers and there's a flute player, a piccolo player. They're actually in the back of the group and they sort of put little things on top of what you're doing to augment it, but the real show is what the drummers are doing. And those of us who have come up in the classical tradition and the European and American tradition, we're sort of used to sitting in the back and sort of putting our little ornaments on what everybody else is doing. Well, this time it's flipped around and then we get to do that. So that's why this is so much fun for us.
One of the greatest things about the piece is the way that he incorporated the kind of community aspect of playing there. You know, he wasn't a composer who just went to Indonesia and took a bonang back and put that into his setup. He went to West Africa and he was like, man, the way that these people actually make the music together, actually learn this stuff by rote, and you know, that's the way that Reich would learn these pieces or teach these pieces to the people in his ensemble. He would play with them, and he would just say, all right, this is the rhythm that you're going to be playing for a while, and they would play it together, the two of them, you know, like just grooving together for a really long time. The whole piece is about that groove, and when we teach the piece to students, we spend so much time doing what seems absolutely ridiculous. We're just sitting there playing the same rhythm over and over and over again, and people are kind of like, yeah, okay, I get it, I understand, it's da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But we're like, no, you're not really understanding it until you've done it about 5,000 times. And you know, at this point, like, we've done it about like 5 million times, so you know, we have kind of our own take on it. We have our own feeling of the rhythm, which I think any group that plays together for a really long time would get to that same place as a kind of community of players. And that's, I think the really interesting thing for me that Reich took out of this experience in Africa was, you know, being around players who played together so much that they created a community personality for the music.
I remember my first drum set teacher teaching me a rock and roll groove, and then the first time I had it and could actually play it and be coordinated with it, I was like, great, look, I've got it. He's like, no, you're not even close. You know, listen, here's how Steve Gadd sounds when he does it, you know, and here's how Tony Williams sounds when he does something like that. And you see, you now need to do this groove over and over and over again for a period of years before it's so inside of you that you make it sound amazing. Drumming is a piece that challenges you to do the exact same kind of thing, but it combines that groove that you can keep doing for a long time with the fact that there's a score with directions that you have to follow to move on to the next thing. What we get to do in the piece is there's a coordinated series or sequence of events that make the piece move forward. So one guy starts playing at the beginning, another guy comes in. Another guy comes in and a guy fades out. These guys do something, another guy comes up. There's kind of a ballet or a choreography. Ballet may be a strong word. There's a choreography. There's a choreography to how people come in. You're not counting 1001, 1002, 1003 or something like that to know how many measures you're playing. So instead of thinking intently about which measure is coming up, you're focused inside the groove that you're playing, and somebody else's decision is acting upon what's happening in the group in order to move the music on to the next thing. It's so powerful in this piece, and it's so exposed by building the whole piece off of this one rhythmic cell. And I think there tends to be a lot of emphasis in the music world on kind of virtuosic achievement these days, which is great, and it's amazing the thing. I mean, I am blown away every time I go on Firth or any of these other websites. Modern Drummer has these amazing, like 12-year-old kids who can play a billion notes at a time. And Reich took this really simple thing that people could learn really quickly, but he puts a lot of pressure on it, and he says, this has got to sustain for an hour and a half, or, you know, an hour and 10 minutes or something. You know, we really try to feel that kind of settle in. When it's really locked in, you can feel time push and pull with the slightest little changes of, you know, when Josh and Jason are doing those phases,
it's almost like time is slowing down at certain points or speeding back up right before the end of the phase or then right after they come out of the phase. And that's really what the construction of the piece is about. I mean, that's what Reich intended, but it's a huge investment on the parts of the players to really get that to come across. I would say for students, especially students who are just starting out, maybe this is their first exposure to Reich, I would say to check out Music for Pieces of Wood and Clapping Music. The thing with those pieces and with drumming, all of Steve Reich's music, is that it really requires you to be tuned into the other players in your group and to be listening really intently, really focusing into everybody else in the group and really feeling the groove, feeling the time, and figuring out how you're going to lock into that. We talk about the analogy of jumping on a moving train with a lot of our students because when you're playing a Reich piece and you're the one coming in next, you know, if you're just standing there and the train's coming up to you and you try to jump onto it, a lot of times you're going to miss it. And
Every time you're going to miss it.
Yeah. You got to get used to this feeling of running up alongside the train and hopping onto it in a really comfortable way, and that comes from really getting inside that groove. But the people in your group are the ones who have to establish that for you, and then you can kind of jump in with them. So I would definitely recommend Clapping Music and Music for Pieces of Wood to get that process started.
Just take any rhythm, honestly, clap it or play it. First, see if you can start with your downbeat in different places, you know, so instead of just playing the rhythm where it is, let your friends start playing the rhythm, and then you come in on beat 2, trying to play the rhythm as if that beat 2 was your beat 1. That's, in essence, all that he's really doing with this music, and by doing such a simple thing, he was actually trying to make a really big statement about where he thought music could go. From that point. And then phasing, of course, is just the whole thing of go against the whole grain of all of your training as a drummer, which is to find the groove, lock into it, and then make sure, and then as a drummer, forget it, a drummer in a jazz band or rock band or something, you're supposed to glue everybody around you. Well, the whole point here is to get so good at your groove that you can, by the tiniest little degrees, pull apart from somebody else's groove, and then eventually, settle back into a groove that's in a different place from the other person's groove.
Yeah, well, they do the video phase thing now. Who was it?
Right, Dave Cosson does
Dave
that.
Cosson
Yeah.
started doing that, and that really is cool because you can see the visual. I'm sure it's up on YouTube or something like that.
I bet it is.
To check out video phase, where he's got a video of himself playing, and he's behind a semi-translucent screen, so he's playing with lights coming down on him, and you can see his arm behind his own arm on the screen, and see the way that the phase is happening ever so slightly. The arms kind of get apart, and then they're really offset from each
It's
other.
like a crazy octopus monster or something like that.
But it really shows you what's going on very slowly. It's like tearing a sheet of paper really incredibly slowly, and just that first tear is really the hardest part. As much fun, hopefully, as it is for you guys to watch us play this piece, we're having even more fun playing it than anybody could possibly be having watching it. The beauty of the music for us is that you're actually supposed to see and know everything that goes on, and there's just a lot of joy in watching it happen and joy in actually doing it. So it's very much, it's a contact sport. It's a participation thing, and anybody who'd be inspired to try any of this stuff out should absolutely do it. The fact of the matter is, I was probably a sophomore in college before I really understood that you had to listen to the other people in orchestra in order to play with them. And, chamber music was the thing that really brought that home for me, and especially Steve Reich's chamber music, because of its transparency of process. It's the thing that everybody's playing the same thing. Everybody in the group knows your part. Once they've learned their own part, they know what you're supposed to be playing. And then it helps you to develop the process of listening, the process of paying attention to the people that you're playing with. And that's what's going to make you a better all-around musician.
In any kind of music that you play.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. Doesn't have to be this kind of music at all.
Yeah, absolutely.